So, friends, we are back again with Nagesh. Nagesh, we reached in your journey for being a filmmaker till you went back to US as a consultant, earned some money to make your first movie.
Right.
How did Hyderabad Blues happen?
Well, the conventional wisdom when you're actually trying to write scripts, or when you're starting out as a script writers, they always tell you to write about things that you know.
Mhm.
And I, of course, ignored that and wrote a script called Venom,
Mhm.
which was not very good.
Mhm.
So far, it's not been made into a movie.
But the title sounds interesting.
Yeah, the premise was kind of fascinating too.
Mhm.
But when I came back to India and I realized that I had to make my own film,
Mhm.
I decided to write about things that I knew,
Mhm.
namely my own state at that time. Where do I fit in? Am I an Indian who's now American, or do I come back to my home country?
Mhm.
So exploring these, but in a fashion that was more easily accessible in the form of a romantic comedy,
Mhm.
is the way I decided to approach it. And again, there was no real conscious thought.
Mhm.
I just started writing
Mhm.
about someone coming back to India, and then what ensues after that, borrowing very heavily from my own journey as well as experiences that my friends were going through.
Yeah.
And it was quite a fascinating thing because Hyderabad Blues came together in about 7 days.
Mhm.
And I wrote it in longhand at the same table that actually did all my engineering studies
Wow.
in 10 years prior.
Mhm.
So it was a very interesting phase in my life because on the one hand I felt like I had failed,
Mhm.
like everything had just been turned to nothing.
Mhm.
And on the other side there was this ray of hope trying to peek through, with me wanting to explore a new journey,
Mhm.
but really not knowing where it'll go, because Hyderabad Blues was clearly written
Mhm.
at the end of 95,
Mhm.
when I decided to go back and take up a job again to collect
Make
the money.
Yeah.
So anyways, once I had what I thought was enough money, I came back home.
Mhm.
I landed a couple of days prior to New Year's Eve,
Mhm.
um, 97. I mean 96 New Year's Eve,
Yeah.
onset of 97. And I remember very clearly I unfurled a yellow cardboard sheet. I asked my cousin to go buy a bunch of cardboard sheets, and in my parents' dining room,
Mhm.
I started putting these cardboard sheets up on the wall, and I started writing the different departments and
Mhm.
all the to-dos
Mhm.
of what to do. And I remember the whole family, my aunt had dropped by, and everyone was sitting and watching, fascinated, wondering what it actually meant in the
Okay.
longer scheme of things, because I had location scout written, and I started asking questions, where's a temple that I could go see, and everyone started chipping in with ideas.
Mhm.
And that's how it began.
So, do you have pictures of those?
No.
Never
No.
Okay. Because that
No.
would have been interesting, right? Just.
Yeah.
But I guess at that moment you didn't think about it in terms
No,
of.
and it was also a little before the time that people sort of went camera crazy,
Mhm.
and they started documenting everything.
Everything,
At
yeah.
that time, I really, just sort of, my parents were there,
Mhm.
my aunt, my mom's younger sister,
Mhm.
her kids,
Mhm.
and her husband as well.
Mhm.
So each one I started assigning tasks, and then I remember my dad had a Maruti van, and we started. No, actually, he had switched it to an 800 by then.
Mhm.
Yeah, he had,
Mhm.
and we started doing location recce's.
Wow.
Everyone as a group,
Mhm.
we'd all go out, and Alwal is a place that we started,
Mhm.
and we went and looked at some temples there,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
I
there's
said,
an old temple there. Yeah.
and I said, oh, this temple could work. That time I hadn't produced a film.
Mhm.
I still didn't have an idea of everything that it entailed, but there was this kind of bullheadedness, one track kind of approach, that there was just a list of to-dos,
Mhm.
and then how to go about doing it. It was as simple as that.
Mhm. And looks like it worked.
It worked.
Mhm.
It
It worked
really
big
worked.
time, actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those wonderful things when you really you don't know how things are going to work out. You kind of hope that in a best case scenario, your movie gets shown at a festival, someone sees it, a distributor likes it, and then they release it, and the movie does well.
Right.
And that's exactly what happened. It was very appropriate. Sometimes the timing just works out right without a conscious design, and it was what was going on in most middle class families at that point.
Right.
And so people all across India could relate to it because they absolutely had some relative
Right.
who wanted to go or had gone, and so it there was a kind of direct resonance. But the irony about Hyderabad Blues was the fact that I'd been away from India for a while, and I never thought anyone in India could relate to that humor. So I was pretty convinced that this movie would work elsewhere.
Oh, okay.
So I took the first print out of India, and I was trying to ship it to different festivals outside of India, and it did a few festivals there.
Yeah.
It never occurred to me that it would work in India. But Elahe, who I had met while, I cast her as Seema, and just a few days before I started Hyderabad Blues, I was so naive at that time. I was going to make a film even without an assistant director, and I asked her, "Do you want to be an AD?" And she owned a designer store in Hyderabad, and she didn't know what it entails, so she said, "Sure."
Okay.
But for her, it was like this new, exciting, random thing, and intuitively, she was very good in production, so she started helping me, and so we became a solid team. And then she saw the film all the way through to the completion, and then towards the end, she said, "You've done so much work here. Why don't you have one screening in India?
Okay.
We'll do one screening in Bombay before you leave." And I was scheduled to leave around June 19th, if I remember correctly. And so around perhaps the 16th or 17th, we had one screening in
So
Bombay.
how long did it take for you to make this movie?
6 months.
6 months. Wow.
I mean, I was there, like I said, if you take Jan 1st as the first day, where work began, by June, I had a film, because I started shooting it Feb 17th, wrapped it March 8th. And I'd made a promise to myself years ago that, when you execute a promise, it feels like, there's something prophetic about it. But when you don't execute a promise, then it seems like, I just made some mental thing and things didn't work out. But it was like that. I told myself that I wanted to make a film before I turned 30. And I wrapped Hyderabad Blues 22 days before I turned 30 on March 8th. And then after that, post-production and everything. And so in June, while I was just headed back to the States, and I was actually saying goodbye to India, we had one screening in Bombay, and Elahe, using her contacts, had brought Shyam Benegal and other people to watch the film, just saying that this young filmmaker's come and I've helped him, why don't you come and watch it? And he did. And he said, "Hey, it's a nice film." And that's it. And people said, good job, and I said thank you, and I left. And about 3 months later, I got a call from Eli saying, "Hey, listen, they're having the first Mumbai festival in India. Would you be interested in sending Hyderabad Blues there?" So I said, "Sure." I mean, it's another festival, but I said, at that time, even money was tight to come by. I didn't know if I should come back or not, so I debated. So as that happens in typical, Indian government festivals, they're like, no, we'll pay your ticket and everything, why don't you come? So with that hope, I came. I was never paid for my ticket, but I got a lot more than a ticket. So at the festival, a journalist called Samar Khan saw the film, and he said, "I think there's a distributor in Bombay who'd be interested," and gave us the number. We invited the distributor. He watched the film, and he said, "I'll take it." And I was like, no way. But he said one thing. He said, "You'll have to get it past the Indian censors first."
Oh, okay.
Because one of the coolest things about Hyderabad Blues, and I'm not praising it, I'm just saying that I came from a world that I didn't know, or I came into a world that I didn't know. And so I had, the movie was full of gullies.
Yeah, there was lots of, but it's what happens in day-to-day lives. That's what you put in there.
It's the way people speak colloquially, and it's ironic that I did that back in 97. And now, about 3 years ago, Delhi Belly comes along and people are giving galis, and the whole country is excited or in an uproar.
Well, at least they are, I guess there's more acceptance for it.
Correct, but that's what I'm saying. It took about 12 years.
12 years for that.
But I did it back then, and I did it like you said, because that's the way people spoke, that's the way friends spoke.
Yeah.
And but the distributor Shamshroff was very he knew what the turf was, so he said, if you get this past the Indian censors, then I'll take it.
Okay.
And then it took us 4 months to battle the Indian censors.
Wow.
We shot the film here in Hyderabad, and everything is there's a lot of corruption, there's a lot of bribery even in the censor board. People are fed, and that's why they pass movies. It's a very, very poor system. Occasionally you get some good reviewing officers, but most of the times you're in deep trouble. So they didn't pass the film, and they asked for up to 91 cuts were the total.
Wow. So that would have cut the whole movie.
That would have cut the movie to nothing.
Yeah.
Because even words like screw had to be removed, and someone actually suggested that Hyderabad blues be changed, because they asked me what Hyderabad blues meant, and I said blues meant it was the frame of mind the main character is in. So what do you mean by frame of mind? I said, well, he's kind of a little bit moody because he really doesn't know where he fits in. So they said, oh, that means it's showing Hyderabad in a bad light, so change the title. I mean, it was that kind of idiocracy. So we did the evaluation committee, we did the review committee, and finally they have what's called a tribunal, which is sort of a mini court in Bombay. That's where we went, fought a case, and there was a fantastic old judge who headed the tribunal called Judge Lenton, and he passed it. He said, he listened to the arguments from both sides, and he said, no, let it go. And finally he asked for 3 audio bleeps. So there were 3 Hindi galis, which they found too offensive, so they audio bleeped it, but every English gali, everything was let through. So the movie...
Wow, so you must have felt like finally there was a sigh of relief.
Absolutely, including the pivotal kiss. They wanted the kiss cut because the explanation given was Indian women don't kiss.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well, on screen perhaps, that's what they meant.
No, I don't think they meant that. That's the problem.
Okay. Well, I think all Indian women would actually thank you for that.
Exactly.
That at least telling those censor people that, you know what, come on, don't be so...
No, middle class morality in India is a very, very scary thing, which it's an extremely confused kind of setup which still exists today, where they're grappling to find some kind of happy space between the old and new. And it leads to a lot of confusion, and especially in art, it leads to a lot of suppression. So
I think the middle class then has probably slightly gone up to the upper middle class, but you're right, the middle class still remains kind
the
of...
morality is something that doesn't change just quickly or even over a generation. So
right. So you must have had a deep sense of satisfaction when Hyderabad Blues, like when you were able to screen it, when it became quite a big hit. I remember going to the theater and watching it.
It was back in the days before the multiplex. So Hyderabad Blues still had to fight the single screen battle. It was, at that time time was not an issue. People let movies run in theaters for a very long time.
Right.
So it ran in many theaters. In Bombay it did like 32, 33 weeks. In Bangalore it was 24, I think. The numbers escape me now, but Delhi we did some insane amount. Hyderabad was about 18 weeks. So everywhere we had a long run. It was not like now spread it out over 15 theaters, and then we'll maximize everything in a week. So it was 1 or 2 theaters, but it ran for a long time. And one of the amazing things that movie did is it gave the confidence for people that if we moved away from a large theater format to the multiplex format, that things would work.
Right.
See, a large theater, a big movie works in any format.
With all star cast and everything, big stars,
Small theater, big theater, it's all irrelevant. But a small movie needs, or small to medium-sized movie needs some kind of management. And people were still toying with the idea of, multiplexes and stuff like that. And this came right at the cusp where in some of the smaller theaters, especially in Bandra, they have these small theaters called Gaiety and Galaxy, which are 300 some seaters. Hyderabad Blues did fantastically well.
And also what I felt about Hyderabad Blues is that in India there's this art cinema, and there is a commercial cinema. For most Indians, theater is entertainment.
Right.
And you go to a cinema.
Right.
So here was a movie that was entertaining, and at the same time it picked up from something that they could relate to in their daily life. So so when did you decide, like, so that gave you the confidence to go, like, okay, this is a career that is this is it for you, but that confidence of the movie and then planning for your next movies, how did that happen?
Well, I didn't have plan B.
Mm-hmm.
I really just plunged directly ahead, and I remember after the movie was done, my dad sweetly asked me, so now are you going back and getting back to your job and getting that MBA that you thought about?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, I'm giving myself at least until December.
Mm-hmm.
And lucky mommy happened before December. But I really, at that point, I was just praying and hoping that that this would work.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really consciously had
Mm-hmm.
a plan B.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that kind of helps. Like I said, everything that happened with Hyderabad Blues had this sense of, very naive, very not thinking about failure or not thinking about the consequences kind of approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I can do that more often. Periodically I remind myself and I push on like that, but I really wish I could do that more often.
Well, I think you've learned over a period of time, so you can't let go of that knowledge, because when you started, you didn't have much
Too much
exposure.
knowledge is dangerous, unfortunately. Exactly. Yeah.
So so how did you pick the cast for Hyderabad Blues?
It was, just by word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
I would ask people if they knew someone locally, and they would suggest someone else. And then, sometimes everyone wanted to be an actor. And also during that time, there was a lot of suspicion claimed to be from the film field.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, there's so much information about the film field, about the whole process, that everyone fancies themselves to be an actor, or they'll come up for auditions. Back in those days, it wasn't easy, and especially with girls, a lot of people thought that I was just a scamster trying to find myself a bride, or
Okay.
because a lot of times I went and auditioned the girls at their places with a camcorder, which
Okay.
is kind of hilarious, because in the
Well, I'm
States,
surprised that the parents allowed, because most parents would have said no.
because in the States and other places like that, it's a very, very clear thing that you actually say that you're making a film, and hundreds show up.
Right.
It was the opposite here. I had to keep trying to get people to audition.
Okay. That
And
must have
convince
been a funny
Yeah,
experience.
and people would come to auditions with father and mother and everyone, and they'd grill me with questions before the daughter audition. It was like,
So-
I was shooting a porn.
So any
Video or
interesting
something.
episodes from that time when you had to? I'm sure there are some humorous episodes.
I mean, it's been a long time, but like I said, the crazy thing was I would be the recipient of an interview. I would be grilled.
So you would be interviewed.
I'd be
Okay.
interviewed. What are your intentions? What are you planning? Who's your producer? And this whole concept of someone just coming from the state, and forget the States, someone just making a film, an independent film, without the proper filmy background, without a setup, was very alien.
Right.
Now you have hundreds of people making films,
True.
especially in a city like Bombay. You'll just see everyone making
everybody
films.
makes, and these days there's lots of avenues also for people to make movies, and for
And it's
screening also.
Filmmaking's become very cheap. So, but back in those days, it was still very expensive, because we were still shooting on 35mm film. So, yeah.
So that was Hyderabad Blues. So then, what next? What happened next?
Well, then obviously when the movie did well, I thought I'd get money easily to make another film. And the irony was, Bollywood came courting, and they threw open their doors, and I was offered some big films. Here in Telugu, I was offered a couple of films as the lead actor, not as a director.
Oh, okay.
Things like that happened, but obviously I had different designs. I always wanted to make films that I could take out to the rest of the world. So the next film that I wrote was Rockford, which was based on my own experiences in a boarding school, along with a couple of my friends. And when I wrote that, people said, you've had a hit rom-com, both as a hero and as a director, why the hell would you want to make a film on a boy? I mean, how foolish is that? And I was like, but that's my thrust. So again, outsider, no knowledge of the industry, naive. And it's kind of foolish to say this, but I've carried that same kind of attitude and approach 15 years later.
Okay.
Because some of the topics that I choose really don't make box office sense. Some of the ways I go about it, not necessarily casting heroes who would ensure some kind of box office. So I do things that way, and it started very early. So I attacked Rockford. It was just a couple of days before the shoot, actually 3 weeks. We were both Ella and I were doing a location recce, and we were in a very nasty car accident that almost killed us both. But we survived that, and then it was the same madness to make films.
It's strange that you mentioned this. You had this accident happen to you 2-3 times, right? You mentioned one like when you were in...
I've been in 4 motorcycle and 6 car accidents so far. So
wow.
My count's at 10.
So these 10 happen every time you started making a movie?
No. 4 were when I was in engineering college. Okay. And then once I, somewhere when I was a chemie and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I've been pretty accident prone. So I've been extremely lucky that I've gotten away and still gotten to live a normal life and do all the things.
Somebody's favorite child, I guess.
Yeah, someone looked out for me, because actually if you look in Rockford, my nose is all bent out of shape. This had to be built after several surgeries, because in the accident it got almost entirely ripped off. So it was rebuilt over several surgeries, and Rockford was just about 20 odd days after the accident. So you can see me in the film, and I got a flattish thing. But I was a boxing coach, so it kind of made sense that So we kind of worked that in. So yeah, that's when I did Rockford.
See, what I've noticed is in your movies, the music plays a big part.
Right.
Because your songs or the music is always uplifting in most of...
I try to.
Right. So even in the Yaro Dosti from Rockford is like a big hit.
Yeah.
Even now people talk about it when they want to talk about friendship.
Yeah. It's funny because when I first started making films, I used the the American approach, which is they just go out for music that's already out there, and they take songs that work for their film, and you create a soundtrack album. That didn't exist in India. In India, you always recorded fresh songs, and songs kind of are the backbone for both promoting a film and making a film a hit.
Right.
Both. And it has not changed in... at the very least 50, 60, 70 years of Indian cinema. It hasn't. Even now a hit song will guarantee a great opening and stuff like that. But I never operated from that. So I was just doing my own thing. And I needed an opening song. So someone suggested, actually Tutu, Sharma, who produced the film, was from the Bollywood business. So he said, let's try and do an original song. So Asma Ke Par Shayad, the song sung by Shankar, is actually the first song that Shankar, Ehsan and Lloyd did together. They had already combined as a team, and they'd agreed to work together, and if I'm not mistaken, they had already signed a film and they're working on the film. But I was a huge Shankar Mahadevan fan, so I just approached him, and he had seen Hyderabad Blues and loved it, so he said gladly. So Ehsan and Lloyd quickly did this tune together. That was the first
song of theirs.
First song that they did, and Gulzar Saab wrote the lyrics. So it was an amazing experience. And then I met with Sony, and I wanted to put different songs in my films, and they offered their catalogs. And KK had just recorded Yaro for his own album called Pal. And I think they had just launched the album or something like that. And I heard it and I said, oh, this has a grace feel, and it's like perfect. So I put it, and of course for the promotional purposes we shot a music video for Yaro, and we shot a music video for Asma Ki Par Shayad. And people just assumed that Yaro is from Rockford. I've been told this so many times, and I've sort of grown tired correcting people
that it's actually KK's.
It came out of KK's personal album, but and it was ironic that many years later, I went back to my school reunion, and my school was called Montfort, hence Rockford. And the majority of the makeup of the class was, there were people from Tamil Nadu, there were people from Kerala, and then there were a mixed bag like people like me. And these guys didn't know a word of Hindi. And the whole class sang Yaro Dosti Badi. I was laughing. I mean, it was amazing. And they were all swaying and singing Yaro, and I was like, when did this happen? I mean, who decided that this would be kind of a reunion? So it was very
No, but I
interesting.
think that song went very well for the movie.
Yeah.
The theme of the movie. And
Yeah.
so, like, where did you pick up the child actor? How did you do that, like, for the auditioning? And
It was a long, complicated search. A lot of schools we sent people to in Hyderabad. We put something like 500 kids on tape. This I remember
Wow.
as a number. And then we shortlisted about 100. And we still went through the same iterative process over and over again. And then finally I found this kid in Bombay. And, it was not a eureka moment. I had brought it down to 3 finalists, and then I picked him. But one of the interesting things in this whole process was I needed a lot of kids. So each one who didn't fit the main character was being slaughtered for the other things. So it was usually I spend a lot of time during the casting process, even now, for a film. Because there's nothing so exciting as introducing fresh talent. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but you still keep trying. And we found Rohan Day.
so, how did you get Gulzar Saab to write the song?
Again, just approached him
Okay.
with the same naive, I made this movie, Hyderabad. He said, yeah, okay, yeah, I heard of it, and I'd love for you to write. And that was it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So I mean, it's obviously that they are very approachable.
They are.
They are. So
They
the
are.
people.
Absolutely.
So how did this? You made so many movies, right? And then you made Bollywood Calling. That was hilarious movie.
That was my third film.
Yeah. And casting Om Puri in that was it a conscious decision?
Very.
Okay.
Very. I had when I came to India, my 2 idols who I wanted to work with were Om Puri and Nasiruddin Shah. So they were always on my radar, and I felt that when I had the confidence, I would approach them, because when you're a nobody, and I think a lot of times I sell myself short. To a certain extent, I still do that sometimes now. But I see first-time directors just approach big actors, and they say yes, and I go, oh my God, I wonder why I never did that. But it took me 2 films, and then I finally felt I had a good role for him. So I approached him, and once again he said yes.
I think you just mentioned something that you see new actors approaching big stars.
Yeah.
So I think you were probably one of the, in a sense, pioneers for these independent films to get to the stage that they are now.
By accident.
It could be by accident. Could be.
I didn't design it, but
it just so happened.
Yeah.
But then I think the stars or the big actors have also realized that the independent filmmakers or the new filmmakers who are coming, they come up with fresh ideas.
Yeah, see, everything goes through in waves, I guess, because right after Hyderabad Blues, there was a little bit of quiet. We didn't actually see, but then a lot of big actors started doing small films. They were taking chances and stuff like that. Then again, it stopped. Now, once again, you see actors taking a little bit of a chance with a new filmmaker,
New filmmakers.
only because the ideas are fresh. Yeah.
So, Bollywood Calling, how did you approach Om Puri?
Again, it was a crazy chance meeting. Actually, I was waiting in line to board a flight at Bombay Airport, I think, and suddenly I looked and Om was in front of me. So I said, "Hi, Mr. Puri. My name is Nagesh, and da da da." And he was like, "I'm a big fan of yours," and he said, "Yeah, fine." And I didn't. Then I said, "Might as well take this opportunity. It looks like fate is intervening." And I said, "I made Hyderabad Blues." And he said, "Oh, you're the young man." Da da da. This that. He turned around and he, shook hands and all that. And at that time, Rockford was just finishing. So I said, "Let me send you a copy of Rockford." Hang on a second. Or maybe I sent him a copy of Hyderabad Blues.
Okay.
because he'd heard of Hyderabad Blues,
But
but
he
he'd
hasn't.
not seen
Okay.
it.
Mhm.
I think that was it. But anyways, I sent him a copy of Hyderabad Blues, and immediately he said yes to the script.
Okay.
So then Eli contacted his manager, and then boom, we were on.
Mhm. So there are some like wonderful dialogues, right? Like more balls,
Yeah.
kind of thing. Like, so I mean, it's. Did you consciously put certain things in the sense like, or some of them developed? Did you have the whole script ready, or some?
No. It was the whole script was ready.
Mm-hmm.
There was a crazy twist that happened in the during the making of the film itself. The way the film was set up was there was Om Puri's character as a producer.
Mm-hmm.
There was the character of a director,
Mm-hmm.
and played by Kunal Vijayakar, and what had happened as I kept shooting, sometimes in a casting process you go wrong. I felt Kunal was not getting what I wanted
Mm-hmm.
in the character. I felt he was going in some other direction, and I was trying to pull him back, and it was just not working. And he was
Mhm.
already cast, and we'd already shot scenes with him.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd shot this big scene, where the Muhurat of the film happens and all that. So then I said, I didn't know what to do. I was panicking, but one of the good things, and this I found out very early, is I know when I've reached a point where I cannot get an actor to do what I want.
Mm-hmm.
And that's usually the time where you have to do the worst job in the whole world, and that is you have to get rid of the actor.
Mm-hmm.
And this was my first experience, and thank God I have Ilahi, because sitting opposite an actor and telling him it's
Yeah.
an enormous sense of rejection. And I was
Mhm.
trying to tell Kunal, I'm sorry, but it's just not working out. But then I had a eureka moment, and this was not written in the script, but I wrote that scene
Mm-hmm.
where in the movie
Mm-hmm.
the director is fired,
Okay.
and Naveen Nishchal, the big actor,
Mhm.
appoints Om Puri
Om Puri
as
as
the
the director.
director,
Mhm.
because he says any donkey can direct.
Mhm.
Exactly. So I wrote that scene,
Okay.
and then all the scenes that Kunal had
Mm-hmm.
were now Om scenes. I
Okay.
didn't tweak those scenes at all.
Mm-hmm.
So Om just came in and did all those scenes, and that lucky accident
Mm-hmm.
just changed the movie,
Right.
because the movie became 100 times funnier
Mm-hmm.
with
Om Puri.
Om Puri in that
Mhm.
producer's role, who's never directed before,
So,
trying to
to do it,
direct, and
yeah. And some of the things are like satirical in that how movies are made,
Correct.
in whether it is Bollywood, Tollywood, or any of these things, and where you have these big song sequences with.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that? Like, was it? I'm sure you grew up watching all these movies.
Exactly. See, those one of the things that when you start making a movie about the film industry, you realize that there are 1,000 anecdotes.
Mm-hmm.
The question becomes, what anecdote do you actually grab?
Mm-hmm.
How does it work within your story, and how do you make it accessible to a population that's not exposed to the process of filmmaking?
Mm-hmm.
They've seen a lot of films, but they
Right.
don't know what goes on.
Yeah.
And what what someone like me might find funny behind the scenes is not necessarily what the
Sure.
audience would find funny. So you distill things which are visually attractive, like the filming of a song,
Mm-hmm.
and you try and make it work. And you have to be on a film set to realize the idiocracy of so many things that we do.
Mm-hmm.
Because you take a big beautiful world that's in 360 degrees out there, and you're trying to trap it in this little box,
Mm-hmm.
a 16 by 9 box. You're trying to trap it onto that,
Mhm.
and the madness that all of us put into our efforts
Mhm.
just to push and cram everything within the framework
Mhm.
of that lens
Right.
is something that is it still fascinates me. I mean, I could make many movies on the industry itself
Mhm.
and
you
never
haven't-
tire of it.
Okay, so you're planning
Yeah.
to make some more someday.
I've toyed with another
Mhm.
movie, and I
Okay.
think I will.
So, did it ruffle some feathers when you made Bollywood Calling?
I was told initially that it would ruffle feathers
Mhm.
because I picked on a lot of people in the industry. But funnily enough, the people in the industry have a good sense of humor about
Mhm.
them, and they just laughed.
Mhm.
And that's what made the film work, because everyone just had a good laugh saying, oh my God, that does happen.
Right.
Yeah. So,
You know, every movie of yours is a different genre
right,
from the previous one.
right.
I mean, other than just Hyderabad Blues 2, which happened, everything is a step in a different, or as if you're experimenting in different genres.
Right.
So is that like you purposely do that, or or do you just get an idea and you want to work on it?
No, it is a very conscious effort because I've said this enough times that, before the sun sets, I want to make a film in every genre. I'm very clear about that. But a story attracts me. I gravitate towards that story and I start building it. But if ever I get the feeling that, oh my God, I've done this before, then I pull away from it. So most of the times I'm attracted towards things that I haven't done.
Okay.
But having said that, it's not just exciting if you make a film in a genre. You got to believe in it 100% and create something amazing in that genre, or there's no point in toying with it at all.
Right. See, you also started a trend of people returning from US and doing movies. I don't know if you realized that.
I think a few of them did, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, so you've been a pioneer in, probably, like you said, accidentally, but I think everybody says that, okay, Nagesh has done it, so it's like, okay, something that we can also perhaps do it.
Yeah,
So-
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so when you see that people see you in this role model kind of plays, so how do you feel that?
I never wanted to be anyone's role model. I'm always, scared of that, and I think it's one of the reasons I don't have kids also, because you have to be a constant role model, 24/7. I like to do my own thing. Having said that, if you do something successfully, you will be the inspiration for
Sure.
someone
Somebody
else who's
else,
about to
absolutely.
follow.
Yeah.
I had mentioned Brothers McMullen when I first started the interview. That was one of the movies that absolutely gave me the courage to take that step forward, because I had always quote to people, this little film that made it. So we'll find examples that work for us, but I have never been excited or prided myself, which is why, I mean, when I do interviews and even I talk about stuff, I'm a little careful that I find people constantly tom-tomming their achievements on a 24/7 basis, especially now with the complete,
Social media.
madness of social media.
Yeah.
I did this, I took my photo with this, I did, and I'm blown away. And I've been forced to do a little bit of this as I get closer to the release of my film. And I'm just blown away by the amount of tooting one's own horn that people do continually
To be in the public eye.
to praise themselves. I mean, it's a ridiculous feature.
Well, I think it's very obvious that it's not real. Right? It's just doing it for the publicity's sake, or for
But
when
no,
the movie is releasing.
Even if it's real, what happened to humility? What happened to, letting your work speak for you? Sometimes I get irritated, and I've tweeted things like, it's irrelevant what you do, it's relevant who you tell it to, is what I had tweeted once. It means you can do a great piece of work, and till you scream from the roofs that I'm an amazing filmmaker, come and watch me, come and watch me, it sort of is becoming irrelevant.
Right. I mean, I think you touched upon social media, which is becoming like it's very prevalent, and
Correct.
It's for some reason, like if you're not on Facebook, you're a nobody.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a cycle or a fad. I think there'll be a time when people will be so fed up because it'll just go into people's privacy will get invaded so much.
It already has.
It already has, but it's going to go to
Yeah.
a certain extent where people will get scared. I'm sure an incident or something will happen which will probably scare people off
We'll
the
see.
Facebooks and all. Well, we'll see. That's what I feel
Exactly.
personally. So, and
Yeah.
then Hyderabad Blues 2 again.
Teen Diwali.
Then Teen Diwali, okay.
Well, again, I wanted to shift gears,
Mm-hmm.
do something that I hadn't done before,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how Teen Diwali came about.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very clearly an attempt to jump into a genre
Mm-hmm.
that I found very exciting,
Mm-hmm.
but none of the investors did, because they said, you've made 3 films
Mm-hmm.
that very clearly are either comedic or light-hearted in nature, or even Rockford being a biopic had some
elements
emotional
of
moments,
humor,
but it had a lot of humor in
Right.
it. So now, why do you want to make a serious drama? And what's funny is, even today I fight that battle.
Mhm.
Even today.
Because I guess people want to put you in a particular
Slot.
and say that, okay, you got to make movies like this
Yep.
only.
And I keep fighting it, continually saying that everyone need not make a certain kind of film. As a filmmaker, some of us can be, I don't mean this as a big tag or something, some of us can be versatile.
Mhm.
We can handle more than one genre.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it took us a lot of time to find the money for, and this I have to
So I'm sure
completely
this
credit
probably makes it difficult for you to find the producers for most of your movies.
It always does,
Mhm.
but it's it's part of the process of being there.
Mhm.
And I've never run after stars and numbers and stuff like that, so it makes it a little bit challenging.
Mhm.
But I think if you believe strongly in your material,
Mhm. You'll find somebody who'll think
Yeah.
likely. It's just some patience is required, I guess.
things do have a way of working themselves out.
Mhm. And so I've read somewhere that Shawshank Redemption actually inspired you to make a movie on at least about
Life in a
life
prison.
in a prison and
Yeah. Very much.
Mhm.
Shawshank Redemption still remains one of my favorite films
Yep.
of all time.
Mhm.
And I wanted to write a film in a prison,
Mhm.
and I started writing it. And then what happened with Teen Diwali happened. It just evolved into something else.
Mhm.
But you know what was beautiful about that period in my life is I wrote about anything that I wanted.
Mhm.
I could go anywhere in my mind, find some
Mhm.
space, explore it, and never really have to worry about numbers,
Mhm.
because I made them in small, limited budgets, and they work themselves out.
And you were financially okay.
Well,
So that's what I was going to ask, because personally you have to be financially a little.
See, I never played in the big leagues,
Mhm.
so even when I was okay, I was doing just fine. But it wasn't until Iqbal that I really started doing
Mhm.
the larger numbers, if you
Okay.
will.
Mhm.
So even when a Teen Diwali was made, it was for a very small fee,
Mhm.
but it just gave me the satisfaction of doing what I wanted.
Mhm.
And
So how did you
there's no substitute.
convince big stars? You had Nasiruddin Shah, you had Jackie Shroff, Juhi
Juhi
Chawla.
Chawla. I wrote the one person I'd actually written the role for was Juhi. I'd
Okay.
written Chandrika's role for that,
Mhm.
and I had a huge crush on Juhi when
Kayamat Se Kayamat
Yeah.
Tak happened. Okay.
when 88 happened and Kamat Se Kamat Tak happened. So it was a dream kind of to work with her. But I always felt she had a very inherent honesty about her that never actually
Mhm.
was exploited.
Mhm.
People always played to her cute side.
Cute and humorous side.
Yeah. And I felt there was this amazing honesty about her, and thank God I was proven right.
Mhm.
So we just approached her, and she said yes.
Mhm.
Nasir and I had sort of become friends because Nasir initially wanted to do Naveen Nishchal's role in Bollywood Calling,
Oh.
and then the dates didn't work out,
Hmm.
and I went ahead with
Naveen Nishchal.
Naveen anyways.
Mhm.
And then I came back and I offered him Teen Diwali,
Mhm.
and he immediately jumped to it.
Mhm.
And then we went looking for someone else, and of course, as names kept getting tossed around, someone suggested Jackie, so we said, why not?
Mhm.
And Jackie is one of the nicest human beings you can meet.
Mhm.
As a matter of fact, after Jackie was cast, the money for Teen Diwali fell through,
Okay.
and Jackie found us the money
Oh.
to
Mhm. To
make
fund
the
it.
film,
Mhm.
and yeah, so it was a very exciting time.
Mhm. And you actually shot in a real jail.
We shot in Mushirabad jail, the famous
Mhm.
Mushirabad jail
Yeah.
that I grew up not far from, and they were going to break it down. And that time there was talk of a mall. Eventually, it ended up as Gandhi College
Gandhi
now.
Medical College, yeah.
Yeah, so we were the last people to go in to
Really?
Mushirabad.
So this was in
And
2001.
This was in 2001.
Okay.
2001, and it was a great time. But what was also terrifying about that was I remember I was in a scene with Nasir,
Mhm.
and as an actor I'm just doing my lines and I'm performing, And at the back of my head, I'm going, oh my God, I suck as an actor, because watching Nasir act is, when he's at the top of his game, is something that's very hard to describe. It's an acting class. He is beyond brilliant. And Teen Diware, honestly, and it's not because I did it, is one of his finest performances. Not Iqbal. I like him in Iqbal, but not Iqbal. Teen Diware is one of it. Yeah, because he was totally drawn to that role. He brought so many shades to that character. And so when I was doing that, I was terrified, because you really realize how inadequate you are in terms of your skill level. And I was talking to Juhi, and she was telling me the same thing. She's like, I'm in a scene with Nasir, and I'm going, oh my God, I'm terrible, because you see Nasir.
You know, there's a scene in Teen Diware where I think he runs away, right? When Nasir gets the money and he goes to Juhi Chawla. He asks her a question that, like, what all you said about you falling in love with me is true or not. It's still, like, he's put that question so...
this is at the end of the film.
Yeah. But it's
Even
still
after
not clear. As a viewer, there is still a doubt in you that is this guy being true or not?
And you don't, you kind of, the way she smiles at the end, it's open-ended whether she was really attracted to him or not.
So, like when you mentioned that Nasir's action is like, so it's like...
He's phenomenal. To take a character like his, and, you know, again, like I said, it was those wonderful periods where I've always written my characters very grey. I never write them, you know, black or white. And to write a grey character like that, who you realize is a murderer, but actually in a strange way you're attracted and drawn to him all throughout the film, Nasir's character.
He's the most, like in a sense, the dominant character in the whole movie.
Yeah.
So all your movies you've been acting, except for perhaps a few of them.
No, actually, earlier on I did. I acted in all the films a little bit, or sometimes a larger role. And then from Iqbal, it completely tapered off.
Why is that?
I didn't feel any necessity. I didn't feel there was a role that I could do. And sometimes if I feel justified, I'll cast myself, but I won't trust myself. I don't have any desire to see myself on screen every time. But sometimes I feel that I understand a character and I'll do it better. It's not a guarantee.
No, but you wrote the characters. When you say that I, as an actor, like, how does that happen? Because you are the one who's written all the characters. So you understand all the characters.
Understanding it and being able to actually perform it are two different things. Plus the fact that your physicality needs to play a part, right?
Okay, yeah.
So how you look, you know, the way you... So I never force fit myself. And it's funny you should ask me that, because after Teen Diware, let's forget Hyderabad Blues 2, because for the most part, right after Teen Diware, I did Hyderabad Blues 2 and I played myself. So playing myself is not much of a challenge. The biggest role that I've done after Teen Diware is almost about 12 years later now with Lakshmi.
Really? Okay.
So I felt, after all these years, I felt here was a role that I could actually do justice to.
So we'll be seeing you in a full-fledged role in Lakshmi.
Yeah.
So you've done Hyderabad Blues 2 after that. So you mentioned initially that you personally tried to move away from a genre that you have already visited. So what made you do Hyderabad Blues 2?
I felt at that time that, and again, mind you, at the risk of sounding like I'm bragging, I did my sequel when people were not doing sequels. Now everyone and their uncle are doing sequels, but I did Hyderabad Blues 2 in 2003 before people even understood what sequels were, and they would repeatedly keep telling me, ये क्या, ये sequels सब you know अमेरिका में काम करते हैं, यहाँ पे चलते नहीं हैं. And you know, so I actually went ahead and produced Hyderabad Blues 2 with my own money. And it was only after it was made that we sold it to UTV. So I felt that, again, after these many years, it might be great fun, about 6 years, to go and take a peek into Varun's life. And that's what I did.
Right.
And
so talking about sequels, you know, like what Hollywood movies or sequels that you like the most, or whether if it's the Bollywood movies, or are there anything that you really
My
enjoy?
favorite, James Cameron is one guy who has, typically, sequels fall short.
Mhm.
They're not as good as the originals. Typically, this is a universal rule. James Cameron is the only guy who's broken that rule
Terminator.
so many times successfully. Terminator 2 is one of my favorite
Mhm.
films of all
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
It's in my top favorite 5
Mhm.
films of all time. And he did that with Aliens, which
Mhm.
was the sequel to Alien.
Mhm.
So he has this knack for taking sequels and then just turning it on its head
Mhm.
and just elevating the game.
What about Star Wars?
I'm not a huge Star Wars fan. I like
Mhm.
Star Wars, but I
Mhm.
don't go Star Wars crazy.
So, which are your top 5 movies, since you mentioned that?
My top 5 American movies are Terminator 2,
Mm-hmm.
Shawshank Redemption, Raising Arizona,
Mm-hmm.
Magnolia,
Mm-hmm.
and Raiders of the Lost Ark.
And in the Indian cinema, which were?
Indian cinema top 5, I have Sholay,
Mm-hmm.
I have Sagara Sangamam,
Mhm.
Old Albela,
Mm-hmm.
Bhagwan's
Bhagwan
Albela,
and Gita Bali.
Bhagwan and Gita Bali, Rishikesh Mukherjee's Bawarchi,
Mm-hmm.
and my 5th one floats many times. Each time I keep subbing it with different ones. I go here, I go there. Sometimes I pick Namak Haram, which is also a Rishida
Mhm.
film. Sometimes I pick Nayagan,
Mm-hmm. The Kamal Hassan,
Kamal's
Tamil one.
Mani Ratnam's Tamil film. So yeah, something like
So, you mentioned Albela, and after that you mentioned
Sagara Sangamam.
no, Sagar Sangamam. You said the first one you said was Sholay,
Correct,
Sagar Sangamam, and then Albela,
correct.
and then Nayagan, was it? No, that was the 5th one.
Bawarchi.
Bawarchi. So Rishikesh Mukherjee made lots and lots of movies that had humor, middle class,
Correct,
and all his movies were like the great,
correct.
pretty much, including Chupke Chupke, and everything that he has made are like, it just, you can connect with them, you laugh through. So why Bawarchi especially?
Well, Rishida, unfortunately, is known only for his humorous films,
Right.
And they're brilliant. I
Mhm.
mean, but if you look back at his early films like Anuradha, Anupama, and
Yeah.
all that, he
Mhm.
tackled a lot of serious topics,
Right, yeah.
and he tackled them with such finesse.
Mm-hmm. And very
Uh,
subtle they were, especially Anupama.
absolutely.
And
And that's what attracted me to him as a
Mhm.
director. The way he made actors act was phenomenal.
Mhm.
It was always real. It was not OTT. It was right there,
Mhm.
and I gravitated towards that even before I became a filmmaker.
Mhm.
And after I became a filmmaker, I realized the genius of the man,
Mhm.
and everything that Rishida did had his touch.
Mhm.
The way he handled topics, the way he handled people. And I had asked him this specifically. We had grown very close in the last 3 years before his death.
Mhm.
And I'd asked him this, and he said, it's funny that if within the span of, I had asked him why he liked my stuff,
Mhm.
and I said, within the span of 2 hours, if you cannot make a person laugh, I wonder what kind of a person you are.
Mhm.
That
Right.
you're always drawn to such morbid things.
Mhm.
But Bawarchi for me was the epitome of what middle class India should be like,
Mhm.
where people actually a very utopian world, where
Mhm.
people actually love each other,
Right.
where people are nice.
Right.
There are no real villains. There
Mhm.
are just some people
Little
with
bit
shades of grey.
Yeah.
So that for me.
And
is
it
very-
was a movie which didn't have a specific heroine in Bawarchi,
Yeah.
because
Rajesh Khanna was the
Rajesh
main
Khanna
guy.
was the main guy, but he doesn't have somebody paired with him as
Yeah.
a heroine in that.
Yeah. And neither
Did Jaya
neither did Namak Haram.
Yes, Namak Haram.
That was the beauty.
Namak Haram kind of had.
No, it
because-
didn't.
Well, there was Simi Garewal, who was supposed to be his fiancée, but not much role.
There was
I agree, there was not much role
and there was
for
Rekha, who secretly loves Rajesh Khanna.
Rajesh Khanna.
But nothing. That's
Nothing.
what I'm
There
saying.
was no song and dance as such about them, right?
And for me, it's so easy, in my opinion, to do a commercial film, not to make a commercially successful film. We're talking
Right.
about two different, but
Right,
it's so
right.
easy to make a commercial film because you just take the same space and you just tweak a few things.
Yeah.
But to play against the grain, tell stories which really don't exactly follow a format but are engaging enough, that's a challenge. And I love Bawarchi. I've watched it so many times.
Well, I haven't watched it many times, but I've watched it a couple of times, and I always used to think that, here's a movie, like you said, that didn't have it wasn't a major hit, if I remember correctly. It was an okay,
modest hit. No, the thing with Bawarchi which attracts me is when you talk about life in India and you always want to capture it on film, you have to make a few changes and exaggerate it. But for me, somehow Bawarchi always says that, that's how life in India was. Of course, it is
It's little
with
change.
respect to that period. And it just puts such a smile on my face and gives me such a warm glow, I can't even describe it.
Just like Bawarchi leaves Nagesh with a warm feeling, many of Nagesh's movies like Iqbal, Door and Hyderabad Blues 1 and 2 put a smile on our face. Join us next week for the last episode of The Journey of Nagesh Kukunoor, followed by the live interview on January 10th, 2014 at 11 p.m. IST, where all you fans can talk to him on our internet radio, hindi.tarangamedia.com.